This is The Competitive Edge with Stephan Aarstol. Welcome to The Competitive Edge. My name is Scott Britton, and I'm here to help you answer a question that we all have. How can I get an edge in my business and life? Each week, we're going to uncover how some of the most successful and inspiring entrepreneurs, entertainers, and thought leaders get an edge, so you too can reach your full potential. Do you want more unique ideas and tactics like the ones we're about to share in this episode? Then you're going to want to do two things. The first is to subscribe to The Competitive Edge on iTunes so that you don't miss out on new ideas from future conversations. After this, you're going to want to go check out my main site, lifelonglearner.com. When you enter in your email address to join the Lifelong Learner community, you'll get access to my most advanced strategies to stack the deck in your favor. Again, that's life-longlearner.com. A few weeks ago, I was at an entrepreneur dinner in San Diego that my friend Jason Gaynor, who runs Mastermind, talks through. It was a collection of amazing people and where I met today's guest, Stephan Aarstol. Once I found out that Stephan's company, Tower Paddleboards, was the fastest growing company in San Diego and named one of the top 10 companies to ever be on Shark Tank, I knew I needed to have him on the show. It didn't hurt that I love paddleboarding and was also curious about how the heck you actually start a surf company. Today, Stephan is going to share how he went from a dude with limited to no surfing experience to starting one of the most thriving companies in the industry. He shares his exact process for starting Tower Paddleboards, as well as a behind-the-scenes look at what really happens when you get on Shark Tank. I definitely learned a few new things in this conversation, and it's jam-packed with ideas I've never heard before about doing business online. Let's dive in with Stephan Aarstol. Stephan, what's going on, man?
How you doing, Scott? Thanks for having me on.
Doing pretty good. And man, I'm just so excited to talk about your story and your journey because you've done so many things that I think people listening to this show either aspire to do or curious about. And really, we're going to give a chance for all these people to learn exactly how you've done all of the amazing things that you've accomplished. Let's start out just with the core, though. Why don't you just take a second here and just tell everybody exactly about your company, Tower Stand-Up Paddle?
Yeah, so Tower Paddleboards was a company I started about 4 years ago. We really had revenues for about 3 years. We're currently the fastest growing company in San Diego. We just got that title in 2014 here. And we were funded by Mark Cuban on ABC's Shark Tank. And we're the reason we got onto Shark Tank is we're in this booming stand-up paddleboard business, but we're manufacturer direct. So we do it a little differently than everybody else, and this allows us to sell boards. Most boards are going for $1,200 to $1,600. High quality boards in this industry, we're able to sell those for about $800. So it's allowed us to shake up the industry a little bit and bring a much better product, much higher level of customer service, direct to consumers.
Man, I'm so excited to dive into all that. But before we do, I've listened to some of your other interviews, and you kind of had this cool framework, it sounded like, when you're deciding to start this company, where you decided what would be your ideal job. And maybe you could talk a little bit about that, and then how you went from coming up with this idea and framework and thought in your mind to actually implementing this.
Sure, yeah. So I think I was fortunate. I got out of grad school in '99, and it was the internet boom, so I jumped right into an internet company. Small team. It was a radiology internet portal. So news and information for radiology. We grew that to from nothing to a dominant industry leader in about 3 years. And after about 5 years of that company, I jumped off into another business called buypokerchips.com. And I sort of cut my teeth in internet marketing with that first company, and then I applied it to this poker chip company. So, and I had a lot of like you, I had a lot of entrepreneurial buddies. And they're all doing, similar type businesses. They're all going off and taking a little niche here and there. And it turns out my niche in poker chips, well, it took off like a gun. It went to, about $500,000 a year in revenues. That was kind of where it was. It was high-end poker chips sold worldwide. There was like this poker boom in TV, but it never got much bigger than that. And so all of my friends had, $5 or $10 million businesses doing pretty much the same stuff that I was doing. But the nice thing about an online business is, it's doing $500,000 a year, but it only requires about really 10 to 12 hours of my time. And it's a one-man show. I'm the customer service person, the shipping person, and all of that. But I had, this 30, 40, 50 hours a week that I could sort of, okay, what do I really want to do? And I tried a bunch of different businesses, with varying degrees of success. And then after doing that for probably 2 or 3 years, I really just sort of sat back and said, okay, now I could just run this poker chip business and be fine really for the rest of my life. It was a pretty comfortable living. But I said, why don't you just shoot for what is your ideal? And then sort of make no sacrifices. What would you like to do? And what I came up with was, hey, I'd like to be the CEO of a surf company. And, we'll travel around to exotic locations. We'll do bikini shoots, and it'll be an online business, really easy business, just sort of a surf company type business. So I had thought that about a year before, and then I was, starting some other businesses, and there were other things that I wanted to do. It had to be an online business. So I started in with a green energy business. So I didn't just start a surf company right away. So I started with this, like a portal for the green energy industry. And I was about 6 months into that, spending most of my time on that, 10 to 12 hours a week running the poker chip company. And a buddy of mine took me out stand-up paddleboarding. And the first time I'd ever done it. And it was super easy. And there was like this 60-year-old dude next to me, catching waves left and right. It's my first day. I'm sort of, stumbling around out there. And I said, wow, you're pretty good. You must have been doing this a long time. And he said, actually, it's my 5th day. And he's catching waves left and right. So I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool, because I tried to surf all my life. And all of a sudden, it's like surfing made easy. So then I got aboard, and I had a 5-year-old son at the time. He's 9 now. And I could paddleboard with him up front. I could get a little exercise. And then within a couple days of having a board, he was able to ride this thing by himself at 5 years old. So there was this. So I looked at this, industry sort of online, because I'm always sort of thinking with sort of a business slant towards things. Mm-hmm. And it was this massive opportunity, this business industry that was growing 100% a year for like a string of 5 years. And then I thought, wow, this really is very close to my ideal job that I was when I was doing this sort of planning like a year ago. And I said, this is it. So I dropped the green energy thing and went with the paddle boards. And I think the importance of that is a lot of people just sort of chase after opportunities as they come up. But, really defining things up front really sort of helps that clarity. And when you run across it, you can jump on it.
I love it, man. What other things besides, the CEO of a surf company traveling around with bikini babes and sweet beaches were in that business selection criteria? Because I think it's really an amazing practice that not a lot of people do. And I think if you outline specifically the other considerations that were important to you, maybe other people can take this and apply it to their own ideas.
Sure. Yeah. And, a lot of this I really got from sort of Tim Ferriss's, 4-Hour Workweek book. He talks about, dreamlining and sort of planning things out, and then taking them back 2 or 3 steps, and then just sort of initiating that and just really thinking about the future. With me, it was because I've experienced some businesses that take off right away, and then some businesses that you're just banging your head against the wall trying to execute that. So it's like there's hard ways to make money and there's easy ways to make money. And I knew these sort of online businesses were very easy ways to make money. And so it had to be something in the online realm and be able to leverage my skill set there. Because really my businesses that have been successful have boiled down to, internet marketing expertise and really like search engine optimization expertise, because I'm starting with, $0. Or when I started the paddleboard company, my poker chip business was actually dying. And I was job hunting, So it had to be something I could start with $0, leverage, online. And then it had to be like, something that was of interest to me, as opposed to what's profitable. I have a lot of, entrepreneurial friends that go into, info products or something. And there's a lot of ways to sort of spin nickels. And I think a lot of them really don't do anything for the world, and there's a lot of money in that. And I could totally do that and probably make a ton of money at that. But I think all of these entrepreneurs I know, they're super talented people. They can also apply those skills to things that, do some good in the world, like improve other people's lives. And I think that ultimately will make you happier in the long run. So that was a part of it.
Totally, dude. I totally agree. And it's so funny. I mean, ironically, I'm in a similar position to you, where basically I have my business My current business, which is an info product business, automated to 1 day a week, where really, I mean, even the activities I do are just related to growing it versus, actual things I need to do. And I think a lot of people kind of get in this position and they don't spend the time or are not incredibly patient about thinking about what is the right opportunity and being okay with waiting for it. And I think there's almost this, this inclination where we're just like, we have, as entrepreneurs, like we have to do something, we have to find something, we have to find something. And we end up like our lack of patience ends up cannibalizing like us fulfilling what we truly want to do or what we truly can do just due to lack of patience. And I'm super curious to just get your thought on that because, man, 2 to 3 years without really like honing in on that particular thing, like that's a long time, man. And I just admire your ability to just be totally honest with yourself.
Sure, and I think you're exactly right there. I mean, you're probably in a really sort of comfortable position, and I think that's perfect. There's nothing wrong with that because I think in life you take these steps, and it's not like you increase 20%. It's like you'll go along and then boom, you'll increase 500%, or you'll increase 1,000% in these opportunistic steps that you can do, and you got to be positioned and knowledgeable and whatever, so you're ready for those when you run across them. But I think as an entrepreneur, you're kind of like, okay, I need to rush this decision. I'm an entrepreneur. I need to come up with a product and start a business. But I don't think that's really the way you're successful because entrepreneurs are basically identify an opportunity and take advantage of that. But those opportunities, you can't just look harder for opportunities. You can to a certain degree, but it becomes kind of a sort of a crazy pursuit. I'll give you one example. Like when I had the poker chip business, I was looking for other e-commerce businesses. And my brother had an e-commerce company too that he sort of ported over from a catalog company. They sell like tree climbing equipment and supplies and stuff like that. And he really grew this business great. So I went out and I got this encyclopedia of all the catalog companies. And this was maybe in 2006, 2007. Every catalog company in the world, there was like 11,000 catalog companies in the world. And it was an index of all these. I just basically read through that entire thing and like checked off, okay, this is one that would be a good one to start. This is one that would be a good one to start with no thought to, whether I knew anything about it. One was like, cheerleading equipment and, another one was like, rock tumbling supplies, just stupid businesses. But I was, trying to hunt for that opportunity as opposed to just, defining what I wanted and waiting for it to cross my path.
What I think is a really good exercise too is to be keenly observant of what you decide to spend your time on as you go through the phase. So like, for example, I was in a very similar place where my buddy works in this industry that is a $1 billion industry. His particular firm, it just matches all the market criteria that's ripe for software. Like his firm owns 1% of the market. They do 120 million a year. And then they're like a leader. So it's like this incredibly fragmented market in a $1 billion industry. No one knows about the industry. So there's no software built for it. They're literally using like Excel docs and FileMaker and all of this like incredibly old school mechanisms instead of like really smart software that's been adapted for their industry. And I was like, awesome. I'm going to do like a ton of idea extraction. I'm going to call like 30 firms. And I'm going to go ahead and like find out all the pains and then basically pre-sell software into this industry. And I had it on my to-do list and it just sat there for like 2 weeks. And it's not because I'm not afraid of making cold calls or cold emails. Like, dude, I will cold call and cold email until the sun goes down. Like if it's something I care about, but I just was like, wow, I'm like not putting any effort in this, even though it's a huge opportunity. And you know what? That's probably indicative that I shouldn't pursue this because when the going gets tough and it gets hard, I'm just the type of person that like has to really care about what I'm working on. So I think like for these people that are listening right now, if you have a business idea or whatever, and you're putting it off and you really get to the root of why you're putting it off. And the answer is because you don't really care and you're purely pursuing this for, the potential to aggrandize a bunch of money. Perhaps you should keep looking for the opportunity and just tell yourself to be patient.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great example because it is very easy to sort of chase the money, but the people that I know that are super successful, I don't mean like the level that I'm at. I think I'm like a starting out entrepreneur, But the people who are super successful are people that really have these sort of passions, and they said, just screw it. I'm gonna go for that, and you just sort of work things out, and then the money will sort of follow you. I think if you do it the other way around, I think it can be done, but I just think it's a lot more, challenging, because stuff always goes wrong, right? And you gotta, like you're saying there, if you're putting that so low on the priority list, you're never going to be able to follow through.
Totally. And truthfully, why do we do things? It's to feel positive emotions, to enjoy. People want to get rich because they think it's going to make them happy. People want to work out because they think having a good body is going to make them happy. So if you're doing this thing that sucks to do, that's unguaranteed in terms of the outcome, you're kind of chasing your tail a bit.
Sure.
So anyways, we could talk about this all day, but what I want to talk about is, so you're in this unique position where you're like, boom, this is it, matches my business selection criteria. It doesn't cost me a dime to get started. What's the first thing you do to start this business?
Well, another interesting thing was that the business also was almost an exact copy of my poker chip business, to where the portal in the green energy business was a business that I had to maybe raise $3 million, and it was sort of unknown territory. Which is exciting, but a lot of risk there, right? And I'd never raised money before. But the paddleboard business was exactly like my poker chip business, even in the sense that it was this booming industry that was brought about by sort of popular media. So back in the day, poker chips went on TV. There was this guy named Chris Moneymaker that won the World Series of Poker.
Oh, yeah, I remember him.
So the popularity was driven by that. So there was this huge boom in the U.S., and then followed 2 or 3 years later by a huge boom overseas. Stand-up paddleboarding, the same type of curve, and I could just see it. And it's an e-commerce company. I know, sell product and get it back, and how to take an e-commerce company through a booming industry like that, which is also going to have a fallout at the end of it. So it was almost like I'd already seen a future there. So, I just jumped right into it. It was very clear what to do. I was going to start with other people's products, create a little e-commerce site, see if I could get some traction there. And then, once I could do that, I would come out with my own, brand of products, because I didn't think there's long-term viability in sort of selling other people's products for the businesses that I've done. And I would start with a minimal number of products, because in the poker chip industry, if you get too many SKUs, and in a booming industry with no money behind you, you get sort of strung out and stocked out in everything. So when we were going to do the paddleboarding business, it was like one product. We ended up coming out with 2 products, but we're just going to go all in on this one product and really sort of double down there. And so on the first container of boards that we brought into the country, they were sold out before they even landed here. And that's right about the time that Shark Tank called us. We got an investment from Cuban, and that gave us a little cash injection and obviously a little PR, and things really took off from there.
Love it. I want to dive into Shark Tank and all that good stuff for sure, but I just kind of want to make this crystal clear exactly what you did for everyone listening. So you decided you wanted to sell this product. Did you go out and look at all the other paddleboard companies and see which ones were accepting resellers or licensing or partnership agreements, and basically just reach out to them and then put it on a website?
Well, what I did is I did a quick industry analysis, and there was no business plan drawn up for this, because I really I wasn't going to raise money, so I didn't feel I needed that. I wanted to cement things in my head. But I looked at the industry, and there were maybe 80, brands in the paddleboard industry, and there was maybe 6, big brands. And there was 1 or 2 that were actually selling direct, and neither of those were really good in online marketing. And the traditional companies were, decades behind in sort of any online, type strategy. And so I knew it was a good opportunity. There wasn't too much competition there. And then when I went to sell other people's boards, I wanted a low end one, and I wanted a really super high end brand. So I brought those in to sort of test those markets, because I didn't know if I wanted to come into this market on the low end or on the high end. And with the poker chip company, what I did is I went in on the high end. We had super high end poker chips, $500 to $1,500 for a personal set of poker chips, right? And that's just a micro niche there. But to establish that high end, we priced it 30% higher than everybody in the industry. And then with the paddleboard, I sort of took a different tack. It was like the bulk of this industry I felt was just somebody just wanted to get a paddleboard. They didn't know too much about it. So we went with, sort of a medium quality board, but really on the low end price wise. And, that's what we did. And then, so by testing that with a high end brand, low end brand, you could see what was moving. And actual sales data. I think that's one thing that's really missing in a lot of businesses and upstarts that people do. They think they've got a great idea and then they just run full in. But you want to test. You want to actually prove that you can get a sale at a price point before you go and invest a lot of money, and that'll limit your losses.
Totally. Okay. So you have these boards they're selling. How were you driving traffic to them? Were you using paid channels, or were you out SEOing all these people that didn't know online marketing?
Sure. And that's another thing. So I had no money. So I took about probably $20,000 or $30,000 from my poker chip company, inventory, and just discontinued one poker chip line and took that money over to buy inventory in the paddleboard company. And by doing that, I killed, probably about 30 to 40% of my poker chip business, which was my, living income. So it was, sort of put your balls on the chopping block there.
Burn the boats, baby.
And so I did that, but it turned out well, and the poker chip business has declined much since then. But, okay. So I used that. Go back to the question one more time there.
So I guess I'm just trying to learn how because other people are selling these boards, right? I'm thinking about other people who are like, oh, there's 80 competitors in an industry with their own websites. How do I compete? I'm trying to figure out how you got people even to your website to buy the boards.
Okay, so it was all SEO because I was not spending a dime on marketing because I didn't have a dime to spend. I had money to spend on a piece of inventory that I could later sell to make money, but there was going to be no, wasted money on anything. I mean, even the cost of running this business, I had a website that was $100 to host. I was splitting rent with my poker chip company. So my, rent was $250 of that. This entire business had a $400 per month burn rate, and I knew I needed that. So I went straight, SEO, so free, marketing. Can I drive people to this site? Because that's another critical piece of starting a business too, is I feel it's important if you use the cheats too early, if you just say, hey, I've got money, I'm going to spend this on pay-per-click, or I'm going to buy magazine ads or whatever, you can sort of artificially make yourself believe that there's a profitable business there. But by putting those off the table, you force it to be a good business, So we didn't advertise. We didn't spend a dollar of advertising for the first 3 years of our business. And I did that because then we find the hacks. Then we can, it forces you to work for that stuff as opposed to just buying your way in.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I like to think about paid in terms of, okay, let's test and validate, and then let's turn the jets on once we know we have something. But
yeah, that's a good point there. In certain things, you definitely do want to test and validate really quickly with pay-per-click. In this industry, just because I knew where it was going, I didn't feel that testing was needed. But yeah, in that case, definitely. It's great for testing.
Take me through the process of going from reseller for somebody else's product to deciding that, okay, I'm going to go find a manufacturer of this board and get a real product that I can sell direct made.
Okay. So, part of the, carrying other people's products too was an SEO thing. So we could carry a paddle, we could carry fins, we could carry all of this stuff, and we'd be getting all the SEO juice coming in from people searching for different stuff, even searching for different brands, and then ultimately they would find us.
Right.
Then we went out to get, okay, we're gonna make our own boards, and we decided to go on the at a relatively low price. So we looked at who was making all of these people's boards. And I've never been to China, even with the poker chip business, that I've been in for 5 years. And I source some of my product from China. But I use a site called Panjiva. Have you ever used that, Scott?
Have not.
Okay, write that one down. Panjiva. So this is the greatest sourcing tool in the history of the world.
I'm scrambling to get my pen out right now.
So historically, people have used I don't know what the big website for Chinese manufacturers is. It's not on the tip of my tongue.
I think there's one that's called Alibaba. That's pretty big.
Alibaba. So this is what traditionally people have used is Alibaba. And the problem with Alibaba is, you go to find paddle boards or surfboards, and you're going to find, 2,000 companies that say they make this, and 95% of those are going to be agents. You're not really going to the source. And
it's like real estate people on Craigslist that are actually like,
yes,
people hawking something they don't have.
It's inundated. And then even if you get to the direct manufacturer, you don't know if that's a good manufacturer or a bad manufacturer. And if you wire this person 30 grand, you don't know if they're going to send you something or they're not going to send you anything, and you just lost $30,000. So there's no real quality score there. And there's so many people there, it becomes useless. Panjiva, on the other hand, what this does is it's a site that analyzes U.S. customs data. So every container that comes into the country has basically the weight of the container, very simple metrics here, the weight of the container, what type of product is inside, where it came from, and where it's going to, the company names. So basically, I can just go to my 80 manufacturers here, plug in their name on this site, and it will tell me, okay, they're taking in this many containers a year, and what months they're coming in, what the weight of each container is, what's in that container, who it's coming from, and then you just you get lost in that for a while, and you'll find these commonalities, and you'll know basically, okay, who's using what manufacturers. This works better for a company like paddleboards, where an entire container of paddleboards is coming in, because only 100 of them fit in a thing. If you're doing, something like sunglasses or something like that, that may be, because so many sunglasses fit in a container, they may be mixed products. So it's harder to get exact information, but for paddleboarding, are really, really simple. So not only can you find their manufacturers, but then you can plug in the manufacturer name, and it will tell you who all they're supplying to. So every one of their customers and how much volume they're sending. And then you can see trending data as to whether this is going up or going down, whether the volume of their shipments is going up or down. So then that tells you, is this a good company that's healthy, that's growing, or is this company that had a few years and they're in a nosedive? So it's actually, you have better ability to source like that than you do if you get on a plane and go to China, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, I just have a business idea right now where it's like you'd be able to essentially work backwards and reverse engineer like industry trend data on how companies are doing just by these shipments.
Yeah, and it's incomplete data, but still it gives you enough of a picture. I mean, you can almost see like market share stuff with this. It's crazy that this information is available, and very few people know about it. It's kind of an expensive service. It's like $400 a month, but I mean, I think it's a godsend.
Totally. Okay, so you're using Panjiva to vet suppliers. You find somebody, and how many boards do you order?
Well, this is something interesting in our industry, and this is a lot of online, because I'm sure a lot of your people that listen to this podcast are sort of in these advanced business models. We're sort of businesses of today, right? So you're disrupting, and we were a disruptor too. We're coming into an industry. All of a sudden, we're going to sell the same boards as everybody else for $400 or $500 cheaper. That turns a lot of people off. Okay. And in an industry like ours, there was like 3 big companies, and they controlled the entire market, and they were all made in the same manufacturer in Thailand, a manufacturer called Cobra.
So real quick, the reason that you're able to sell $400 to $500 cheaper is purely just a margin cut on your end?
Well, we're actually making better margins. It's a distribution change.
Okay.
So really the innovation that we made was not we made a better paddleboard. I mean, we did some things there, but we changed the distribution channel. And in most industries, if you make a product for $1 overseas, that product is going to sell in retail for $4 or $5. Okay. And then in the paddleboard industry, these are, if there's a $1,600 product, 1,000 of that cost is in the distribution channel. So people think it's in like, okay, whether we make it here in the US or we make it overseas, it's all in the distribution channel, because you've got sales reps, you've got distributors in each different country, and then you've got retail markups, you've got wholesale markups. There's all these crazy markups that really does nothing for the end customer to get them a better product at a better price. And so there's a lot of waste in the distribution channel. So we changed the distribution channel. We said, we're going to import this ourselves, and we're going to sell it direct. There's only sort of us and the same Chinese manufacturer that's making it for all these other brands.
Right. And just to give a few people some other examples of companies that did this, and I love this, like one example is in the supplement industry, companies like On It that sell their product directly to consumers. They're not in the GNCs and all these things that cause like a price markup so that people can make money. Another example is the men's pants company, Bonobos. they make their company, they make their pants, and then they don't have storefronts unless they have these like try on stores where you can try stuff on. But because it's entirely e-commerce, they can ship direct to consumer and produce really high quality pants that don't require the margin cut that comes with the overhead of having a store or selling it through somewhere else. Although I do think they're in Nordstrom's now. But yeah, I mean, it's just a classic example of cutting out the middleman and then thus being able to provide a better price, which is awesome that you recognize that.
Now, and I think an interesting thing here for entrepreneurs, there's very obvious cases of, cutting out the middleman in a retail situation, which is what we did. But the idea of innovating on the distribution channel is, I think, something that entrepreneurs don't pay enough attention to. They're always worried about coming up with some great new product or some great new service, and they focus all their innovation effort on that when there's ample opportunities around just to change the distribution strategy. A good example is like Netflix, right? They don't sell, they sell movies basically, the same thing that everybody else sold, but then they did it. They just said, okay, don't go to a store. We're going to send it through the mail, and we're going to have, 3 in your house at all times. Initially, this is what Netflix did. And then they, evolved now to, okay, we're going to distribute these through the, through the web. And so they didn't do any innovation on a product level, but they innovated on the distribution and completely, can you find a Blockbuster today? And that's in 5 years, that entire industry has changed because of one little tweak to the distribution strategy. So what we're doing is a very classic example of it, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for stuff like that.
You know what's funny, man, is that you didn't even know this getting into this industry, that there was this inefficiency that could be exposed.
Well, exactly. I didn't, but when I started looking, at the business more, before I started a business, I sort of analyzed the industry and thought, is this going to be, a good business or not? I've done several businesses where I thought of a great product and then tried to sell it, and, a horrible experience, right? Like, you want to find existing demand and meet that demand, and you got to have some kind of sustainable competitive advantage in there, or it's going to be this sort of bloodbath that you're going through with everybody else. And so I was pretty selective, and I think that was another thing. If we go back to the earlier point, it took me 2 or 3 years to do this. I think you want to be selective there, because once you get into this thing, whether you're trying to grow $1 billion business or a $1 million business, it's kind of the same amount of effort. And
totally.
So, you better have a competitive advantage, or, hey, just sit back and wait for something better to come along. Same thing as dating.
Yeah, it's so true, man. I think what happens is once you have some level of success as an entrepreneur, making money online becomes somewhat easier. And sure. It's almost like the challenge is to be disciplined about what you spend your time on. And for me, I know this is the very relevant example for me right now is I have all these friends that are making a killing on Amazon, basically selling physical products, where there's all these people that don't know online marketing, and they're going and getting these products. They're creating new brands that are basically being drop shipped on Amazon, and they're just competing to outrank all these legacy brands that don't know anything about marketing across a ton of verticals. And it's wow, dude, I have friends going from 0 to 30 grand in 4 months, without really any overhead and very little risk. But, is that really the opportunity that I want to pursue and focus on? Because whether it's this or going after $1 billion opportunity, it's probably going to be the same amount of work.
Yeah. And the other thing is that, there's a base level you got to get to. You do what you have to do until you get to do what you want to do.
Totally.
And I think to do, what you have to do sometimes is you have to identify the opportunities. I think Amazon is actually it's an interesting, spot, because people think of Amazon as this, one of many e-commerce stores, right? You've got Sears and Walmart and Amazon and, eBay and all this other stuff. But Amazon does 1/3 of all online transactions. So a lot of people obsess about, how they rank in Google and stuff like that, and they're not even on Amazon. So they're ignoring 30% of their market and focusing on this. Amazon is almost like its own another internet in its own right. You need to do well on Amazon, you need to do well on the internet, you need to do well in the physical world.
Absolutely.
It's a big opportunity.
Absolutely. The beauty is you don't have to have a massive mailing list or website traffic or all that stuff to get sales there. The marketing channel, which is often the hardest part, is built in. for a lot of these products, which is why people can go from zero to hero so quickly. And I know I experienced that with a book that I did where, I got a bunch of traction on Amazon pretty quickly. And then next thing I know, I'm getting emails from friends that they received a recommendation to read my book. And God only knows how many people are on Amazon's mailing list for products.
Yeah, so it's insane. I mean, they've got an audience of, I think, like 200 million, buyers around the world. It's the size of a country, basically. And as a writer, I mean, if you're a good writer, this should be like the heydays right now, because there's a term in growth hacking that's talking about OPN, other people's networks, and the ability to leverage other people's networks. And this is what you can, exactly do today. Amazon can get you published, and it can get you that distribution. All you have to do is create, sort of the great content or the great products, plug it into their machine, and you're really able to leverage, somebody else's network. It's a powerful concept.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to kind of shift gears here and talk about, I'm sure, a topic that a lot of people ask you about, and that's Shark Tank. So it's kind of funny because me and my roommate were driving along. We always talk about business and startups because that's one of the things that we're both passionate about. We were talking about Mark Cuban, and we're like, man, like, this guy owns a basketball team. He's got like a bunch of investments. I mean, is he even that much of a value add, like as an investor versus somebody who doesn't have as much going on? And maybe before we can talk about your very specific Shark Tank experience, you can just answer that question for me, dude.
Yeah, I think it depends on what you want to get from an investor. Even if you look at the different investors there on Shark Tank, like some of them have a lot less going on, and some of them really aren't even that wealthy of individuals. So if you have a meaningful business to them, it's going to be much more meaningful to them, right? So if you're going on there and you're looking for somebody to really get into your business and, sort of the day-to-day or really help you with connections and stuff like that, you probably better go with somebody else. I mean, Cuban's not he's not gonna lend you his connections because he's more of a higher celebrity status too, so he's got more to risk, something goes awry. But where he's been invaluable to us is a couple things. One is being a billionaire or having a billionaire within your company helps you from a legal standpoint. Like if patent trolls try to come after you, they realize that you actually have teeth to come back after them. And most small companies don't have to do that. So you got to play by these small company rules of, we don't want to step on anybody's toes. But that allows you to almost act like a big company in a way. So that's really cool. The second thing is he's been his experience, because I think he's a super, super bright guy. And I don't think a lot of people get that about Cuban. They think, well, he got lucky in the internet.com era, got in and got out at the right time. But he's actually got sick intuition. So he saved me, a number of times. And I'll give him a weekly email report, and then if I have any questions, I can email him. And in the middle of the night, he'll get back to me in 10 minutes. And it's usually very, very abrupt and brief, and he'll swear at me sometimes if I'm trying to do something stupid. But his instincts are really good. And sometimes I'll disagree with him. Initially I'll think, oh God, why did I even ask him? But then, I'll think about it for a couple of weeks, and I'll think, he's got a valid point there. So that, critical intuition there, you can't put a price on that.
Sure.
So, and then the fact of having, Mark Cuban, like most people will know who that is. When I went on Shark Tank, I had never even seen the show before. And
no way.
6 weeks later, I'm pitching to them. So they actually found us. They were looking for a paddleboard company because they knew it was this hot sort of hip sport. And they searched around, and we were doing it a little different than everybody else. And we were also, at or near the top of Google. So they called us and said, how would you like to be on this show? And we weren't even raising money. But I'm like, are you kidding me? This is on ABC on Friday nights? That sounds great. I'd love to. And I didn't know Mark Cuban was going to be on the show.
Wow, that's so funny. Because I feel like a lot of people have these visions of grandeur where yeah, I'm going to get on Shark Tank. And here you are just doing your thing, and Shark Tank reaches out to you.
Well, and I would, if people are going after it, I think it's a wise thing. It's a very leverageable thing now. But yeah, we were kind of in the right place at the right time. Again, opportunities sort of you come across them, and there's a lot of luck involved. I have no misnomer about that. There's a lot of luck in everything you do if you're very successful in something. But part of that is being ready for it when it happens, right? And I think that's what experience gives you. And that's why, most entrepreneurs, I think like the average age of starting a company is right about 40 years. And it's not because, 21-year-olds are, any less intelligent. They're probably smarter than most 40-year-old people. But that sort of accumulated sort of wisdom and experience allows you to draw from that and be ready when something comes across your plate. So
I love it, man. Take me through the Shark Tank experience. Like, I want a little behind the scenes. So did they ask you to prepare anything before you went on the show? What was that like?
Well, it was right in the middle of our busy season. So they must have contacted us about, June 1st around there. And then we filmed in the middle of late July. And I just hired my first employee 2 weeks earlier. And so it was like we're in this, we just sold out, we were in the process of selling out our first container of boards. So high season, startup business, I've got no time for this, right? But I'm like, this is a big opportunity. So we sort of put everything else on hold. And when they called, they were like, would you like to be on the show? Okay, great. All right, we need a video, and we need that in like 3 days. And I have no video editing or anything experience. So I got to throw together, a 5-minute video in a couple days. And also there's this huge timeline on it. And so we put that together, sent that in. They say, hey, we really like your video. Okay, why don't you fill out this application? We need this in 2 days. And I never really knew I was going to be on the show at this point. It was all just, okay, do I want to spend 2 days of my life? Is this worth the risk, right? In a time when I'm very busy. And so it was that process of that over about 2 or 3 weeks. Then they assigned, two of their producers, to me, and they said, okay, we're going to prep you for the show to see if you're going to be good on the show. And they would sort of fire questions at me and have me answer the questions. And it was a sort of vetting process. And people, I assume, are going through this with me. I thought even potentially other paddleboard companies were going through this same process, and I was competing with them. And then after a certain point, they said, okay, we're gonna fly you up to to LA. You're gonna be here for 4 days, and then we're gonna have you pitch the Sharks. And when you go up there, you're kind of sequestered in a hotel. And then we went to like a dry run to the producer staff, and there must have been like 40 producers on this thing. And we do well enough. Some people that were up in LA got cut at that point, so they haven't pitched the Sharks yet. So I imagine there's a lot of sort of heartache in this process. You kind of can sympathize with these American Idol type people.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking that.
And then 2 days into this, I found out that, our guest shark at the time, because it was season 3 of Shark Tank, is going to be Mark Cuban. And then it was like crystal clear, because I literally couldn't even remember the names of these other sharks, and I have a horrible memory. So I was so worried about going on there and calling somebody by the wrong name. But then as soon as Cuban was on there, I was like, okay, this is the obvious guy. He's like basically a celebrity endorsement plus an investment. I'm like, I value his money like 3 times everybody else's. So I kind of went in there with that attitude.
Got it. And did you adjust your pitch at all to cater to Cuban?
Not really. I mean, I don't know if you've seen my episode, but it was pretty horrendous. It wasn't the greatest pitch in the world. So I went in there. I wasn't even nervous at all. I was just sort of on set all day, standing backstage right before I'm about to go out there and pitch. And I was just sort of like, this is crazy. I started this business 9 months ago, and I'm looking through the monitors, backstage, and they're zeroed in on my paddleboard with like my logo there. And I'm like, this is a crazy experience to have, this early in a business. And it was just, I was like, man, no matter what happens out there, this was just, an amazing experience to even be part of. So, it's all upside from here. So I went out when they opened those little doors where you walk into the Shark Tank with that sort of, feeling sort of just total, I don't know if you call it happiness, but sort of just total contentment. Like, I cannot fail at this point. And I walked out there, and that was probably a mistake, because about a minute into my pitch, I went to hit my little clicker because I had a slideshow of like 4 slides. And funny enough, like literally 2 minutes before I walked through the doors on Shark Tank, they handed me this clicker and told me how it worked. And I was like, really? You're going to do this 2 minutes? They popped the doors open, and I'm stumbling out there. But then my slideshow screwed up. I forgot my pitch, and I was literally silent and stuttering and stammering for like minutes on end as the shark started to tear into me. And it's a live deal. It's not like, okay, let's retape that or whatever. It's just like you just start sweating and you either run out of there screaming or you collect yourself and continue with them tearing into you. So I did collect myself, but it was pretty bad and pretty awkward. And they showed that when they actually put together the piece they put on TV. They kind of edit. I was on there for maybe 45 minutes, an hour. They edit that down to about 10 minutes, and they use that screw up for sort of dramatic effect.
Oh, I'm sure they just doubled down on all kinds of like peak and valley experiences just to make it an over dramatized theatrical experience for sure. So anyways, the good news is it worked out. And I heard you say something that I didn't know about what happens after sharks commit on air to an investment. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what a lot of people don't necessarily know about a lot of these deals.
Yeah, so it's a handshake. It's a handshake deal, and when they open those doors and you walk out into the Shark Tank stage, I mean, you've never met these people before, right? This is your first time meeting them. It's not like you guys are having coffee on set before this, and then you say, okay, let's go shoot this. So you walk in there, you give them your pitch. Maybe it takes a half an hour. Some people an hour and a half, and then you walk out and you basically you get a deal or you don't get a deal. A handshake deal, sort of a verbal agreement for TV. And I've never seen Mark Cuban since then in person, right? Never talked to him on the phone. It's been all email since then. But some of those deals, never go through. So then the shark will contact you after the show, maybe a month, maybe 2 months, maybe 3 months. On ours, we filmed in July. We closed the deal in November. I was in Cambodia, and where I closed the deal, and 5 months or 4 or 5 months later, and there's a negotiation process after the fact, and I think some of the sharks are better than others at sort of representing the truth of what happened or what the agreed to part was there. Sometimes they'll look at companies' numbers and then they'll just completely say, okay, well that deal was crazy. Here's what I'll actually do for you. But in ours, Cuban kept to the true spirit of it. I asked him, one of my deal points was I wanted to put his face and his name on the front of our website because I was looking at this as a celebrity endorsement. And then he was like, that's fine, but you have to help some of my other companies and be sort of a consultant for some of my other companies for SEO. And I'm like, sure, yeah, no problem. So there's little things that you work out. But I think it's a pretty lower percentage than people would imagine of the deals that actually close. Even if you get the deal on Shark Tank, it's probably 30% of those deals close. And then the other funny thing is that even if you get a deal or don't get a deal and you film pitching the sharks, like something, I don't know, it's maybe 20% or 30% of those never air. So even if you make this deal, and a lot of times you're giving away a chunk of your company because you think you're going to air on this TV show, you're going to get this celebrity investor. A lot of those people never air, so they gave away a chunk of their company, never aired, and they go on with their lives.
That sucks. Does Shark Tank take any piece of the company? I heard they used to.
They used to, and I'm contractually obligated to. They've got some kind of an option on, and it's not a small amount. It's like 5% of the company equity or 2% royalty perpetually at their option. And that's sort of a scary document to sign. And I think that's why in the first couple of years, they didn't have a lot of big companies. But, in my company, there was nothing there. So I didn't really care. And even today, we're going to do 5 million this year in sales. I am praying that Shark Tank exercises their option on my company because there's no better partner to me than, a media company who can re-air us at any time. But a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to give Shark Tank 5% of my company. I would love to give Shark Tank 5% of my company.
Absolutely. So, at the end of the day, Shark Tank sounds like it was a win for you.
It was definitely a win. And a big reason it was a win was not because of the airing on TV, but it was because of the one-time event that happened that was newsworthy, that we sort of rolled up our sleeves and went after it from a PR perspective. And we got, a dozen articles, in well-placed articles that basically raised our SEO. And really, that was one of the big reasons that I went on the show when they called, because I wasn't raising money. I was like, man, if I could get a link from abc.com, that would be a huge link. That was one of the, the things I was like, wow, I should really do that. That's how SEO focused I was.
Wow.
And then I sort of parlayed, being on Shark Tank into getting links from all of my universities, major newspapers, major magazines. And that is really what changed the growth trajectory of my company, not being on Shark Tank. Shark Tank is airing on Shark Tank is just sort of a wave that washes over you that most small companies aren't even, don't have the capability to even handle.
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that, because I've experienced the same thing where there's just like, unfortunately, it's not how people work out. There's a lot of friction where people watch something on TV or hear something on the radio and then decide to make a purchase. Like it's just really hard to capitalize on that. And I had an experience where I ended up actually being on the largest morning show in Australia. And I think something like 5 million people watched this episode, 5 million people watched this. And I got like an additional like 20 email subscribers from it on my blog. And I was like, wow, this is ridiculous. And the same exact thing happened with being on New Zealand's largest radio show. Like the bump from initial media or that kind of like traditional media that people can't like click directly to your website, or there's just like a ton of variables that go between a purchase or a sign up for something and them actually seeing it is actually a lot of friction. But I love this idea and strategy of really like, how do we maximize this in a meaningful channel, piggybacking off this exposure?
Yeah, and exactly what you're saying in media. That was the actual experience with Shark Tank even. And Shark Tank is, you're basically an infomercial for your product for 15 minutes, right? But going into that show that night, we had $5,000 in sales for the day, right? Mm-hmm. By midnight, $13,000. Airs to 6 million people, and we got an incremental $7,000 in sales. I was like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Who the hell buys advertising on TV is what I was thinking.
Seriously, like what is that, dude? Like 10 boards? Like, you know what I mean?
It was ridiculously small. And then there was sort of this honeymoon period because of, I guess, the TiVo effect. So for 4 days, we had about the same number of sales, maybe 15,000 sales, but still all told, it was $50,000 in sales. That's not, $50,000 in profit. That's $50,000 in revenue from, a huge thing. You couldn't have bought that advertising for $2 million, $3 million probably.
Man.
Insane to me. And I think a lot of people like see Shark Tank as, oh, they got on Shark Tank, they're millionaires or whatever. I'm in this private Shark Tank group on Facebook of people who've been on the show. And there's a lot of disillusioned people on there because they either went out and bought a huge amount of inventory or just said, all right, I'm rich, I'm on Shark Tank now. And then you find out, boom, you have 4 days of big sales, not super sales, and then it's over.
Wow. That's so valuable to hear, man. And I hope people out there can get a realistic picture of what this can actually do for your business and how you should be thinking about it. One last thing I wanted to touch upon, if we have time, is just the transition of you from going from manufacturing products abroad to directly manufacturing here in the US. Do you have time to chat about that?
Yeah. So that's something we've been fortunate to be able to do. When we came into this, the stand-up paddleboard business, which is really, we're coming into the traditional surf industry. That's a lot of our competitors. And it's a industry that's been around for, 30 or 40, years in a strong way. And it's a really, tight-knit community of businesses, and not ultra-competitive businesses either. So when we came into that as sort of an outsider with no surfing background, I mean, I barely even surf. I'm not a great paddleboarder. I enjoy it, but I'm not, like a competitive paddleboarder. And a lot of these surf companies were started by these people that were, pro surfers or competitive. And so we came in, we were the outsiders, and then we changed the distribution strategy. So nobody in the industry liked us, like competitors. Everybody was like, who is this tower? They're not supporting, the industry. We're not supporting the magazines because we're not buying magazine ads. We're not advertising. We're not supporting retailers because we're selling direct and they can't get our boards. So there was this, customers loved us, because customers were now getting our product for $500 cheaper, the exact same product. But the industry, there was a lot of pushback there. We were seen as this disruptive force. Well, the surf industry in the past 30 years has gone through this sort of transition from making boards here in the U.S. to everything is outsourced to China and Thailand and Vietnam, places with low wages, because it's a pretty manual process. Like making a paddleboard takes like 20 hours of labor, 25 hours of labor. So 98% of the manufacturing is overseas. There's a couple boutique, really small, shapers and shops that do it here locally. But by being this e-commerce, company and having success with that over maybe our first 3 years, and being pretty, highly profitable doing that, we're able to, because we basically cut the big chunk of cost out of a paddleboard, which was the distribution channel. $1,600 board, maybe $1,000 of that cost is in the distribution channel, not in manufacturing. So by cutting that, we realized all of a sudden, hey, we can actually make boards here in the U.S. It's going to be smaller cycle times. It will require less, capital investment. We don't have a lot of money as a small company. We said, let's build boards here in the U.S. It would be, pretty cool. We can bring manufacturing back to the U.S. So we went from being sort of this disruptive company to, we're one of the companies that's actually supporting, manufacturing in the U.S. of manufacturing that used to be in the U.S. And in doing that whole process, now we're the fastest growing company in San Diego. So we've kind of, become a poster child in a sense for, how do you bring manufacturing back to the U.S.? And I think it's not just in paddleboarding. I think there's opportunities for this in sort of every e-commerce company that goes out there. If you start to look at your company a little more holistically, as we're not just a company that's, buying cheap stuff and selling it online, but how do we take this and, create a holistic company out of that? And when the manufacturing we're doing now is going to give us, I think, huge competitive advantages down the road.
That's amazing. I mean, not only is the story going to be awesome for you guys, but you're actually doing this at a profit, right? The margins work in your favor.
Really, I mean, we're at a great profit. So, I mean, we'll do $5 million in revenue this year, and $1 million of that will be profit. And we're doing this in an industry where companies are growing fast, but none of them are profitable because they're using, the old distribution channel. Nobody in that distribution channel is making any money. There's companies going out of business. So it's really much to do about, nothing there. And at the end of the day, these are not profitable companies. So they're not making customers happy. They're not making money. What's the point? I think there's going to be sort of a bloodbath coming here in the next few years with a lot of these, traditional companies that are trying to compete with really old school thinking.
What are the market conditions, if we had to codify this, where you can go from outside manufacturing to basically opening up your own manufacturing plant here in the US? Is that just because you've developed an audience and market superiority in terms of online marketing presence?
Well, it helps to have that, the direct consumer connection there, because then you can skip the distribution channel, right? But how big is that distribution channel? What are the costs of bringing product into the country? A lot of things lined up in the paddleboarding world, because you can only fit 100 paddleboards into a container. So a container costs $5,000 to bring inland. So $50 of the cost is actually bringing that on a ship. Where we're in San Diego, we can produce those in Mexico with similar cost labor, and just shoot them across the border and wipe out the shipping cost and all the shipping pollution of getting there. Like, why are we making things overseas? And then it's how much of your distribution in your market. Like certain markets, there isn't a huge distribution cost. The poker chip market that I was in, everybody's a direct there already. There aren't poker chip stores. There's like cheap poker chips you can buy in Walmart or whatever, but that's just basically little plastic, trinkets or whatever. But I think every e-commerce company can sort of look at their industry and say, okay, if we're making this for X and it's selling at retail at 5 times X, well, there's a huge distribution channel cost there. And if you can eliminate that, your products can be made in the US. You can make it for twice the price here and still have a better profit. So when we jumped to making it in the US, we didn't just go willy-nilly and say, oh, we're just going to start making everything in the US because we don't have a manufacturing background at all. We grew those first 3 or 4 years with 3 or 4 people. So we don't even have the capability to do that. So what we started to do is we went to really high-end materials and the high-end boards. So the carbon fiber boards, the carbon Kevlar boards, stuff like that. And it's still today is a very small piece of our business. But we're starting there, we're getting the competencies, and then long term we can potentially produce in Mexico some of the larger volume stuff. But it's something you want to ease into, I think, and look for high cost in the distribution channel, high transportation costs, and a level of expertise helps in your products, because I mean, quality is a consistent problem you get out of China, and if you bring that in house, you get rid of a lot of nightmares. So just sort of think in those terms, and I think what we're really going to find over the next 10 or 20 years, especially as China gets much more and more expensive as their economy grows, there's a lot of opportunity for bringing manufacturing back to the U.S.
Absolutely, especially as technology gets more sophisticated and can replace a lot of the costs associated with manufacturing at a very cheap, scalable way.
That's a huge point. If you look at like Elon Musk's Tesla, I mean, like they're building those cars in Northern California, probably the worst state in the country to do manufacturing in, right? From a cost perspective. And now they're going to build all these batteries. Where are they going to build them? They're going to build them in the U.S. because he's doing it with robots.
Right. It's definitely an exciting time to be in business. Stephan, this has been amazing, man. So much knowledge dropped here. If people want to learn more about the paddle boards, about Tower, about you, where's the best place for them to go?
Sure. So just towerpaddleboards.com is our URL. My name's Stephan Aarstol, Aarstol. I actually write quite frequently in some business magazines, Fast Company, Forbes. I'm a weekly columnist now in Inc. magazine. So I do a bit of writing. We're a small company. You can go on our website and sort of reach all of us.
Awesome, man. I absolutely love it. Thank you so much again for coming on the show, man. And I just look forward to seeing you guys continue to thrive.
Awesome. My pleasure, Scott. Thanks for having me on the show. I know you've had some amazing people on this show, so it's really an honor for me.
Before we finish up with today's Mindshare, I just want to say thanks for listening to another episode of The Competitive Edge. If you enjoyed the ideas in this episode and want access to future conversations, the best thing you can do is subscribe to The Competitive Edge on iTunes. If you haven't done that already, right now is the best time to take care of that and get on board. And while you're there, if you feel like this show has made a positive impact on your day, it'd be great if you could leave us an iTunes review so that more people can find the show. Now, I know we covered a lot in this episode, and there might be a few key ideas or tools that you want to remember. So we went ahead and compiled all of the notes and links mentioned from this conversation for you on lifelonglearner.com. That's life-longlearner.com. Alrighty, let's go ahead and dive into today's Mindshare. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed that particular conversation with Stephan. He is such a stud, and boy, it's really cool what he's built and how fast he's been able to build it. And today in this Mindshare, I really just thought I'd share something that was on my heart today, and I think it's something really important for people to hear that are starting things. And I got this message at a retreat with my church this weekend. What up, C3 San Diego? You guys rock. And I think it was just so applicable to entrepreneurship. So anytime we try to do something great or we have a vision for our future that's grandiose, for Stephan, it was to be the CEO of a surf company. For you, it might be to start $1 million business or to build a nonprofit organization that affects 1 million lives, whatever it is. When we paint that vision, that grand vision that we have for our lives, it can seem really daunting. How the heck do we do it? How do we get started? Oh my gosh, there's 1 million things I have to do. This is scary. Well, I think it's really easy for us to look at a lot of these companies and think that they were overnight successes and fail to just realize that anything that is ultimately great requires a lot of time and effort. And the message that just one way to think about this that I really liked that I got this weekend was, the Great Wall of China was not built in a day. It was built one brick at a time. And all that they could do was lay each brick as perfectly as they knew how. And if they kept doing that, eventually the wall would be completed. And that's what they did. And so this is just a thought that really struck me as at this particular time in my life. And I think it's just something important for everybody here out there, that whatever thing you're trying to pursue that is ambiguous and large and scary and has all these million things you have to learn or figure out how to do, don't put your focus on how daunting that challenge is ahead of you. just put your focus on that one thing that you need to do directly in front of you for the next step, and do that as perfectly as you know how. And if you just keep doing that and you keep persisting, then you'll be successful. You'll get to where you want to be. And if you just remind yourself of this mindset every single day, it's just going to be the process is going to be a whole lot more fun, a whole lot easier to manage. And you'll probably be more likely to stay and persist and keep going despite the challenges that we face in periods of uncertainty. This is really on my heart. I hope that it resonates with some of you out there listening. And, I just want to say I'm really grateful for your support. I'm really grateful for all the people leaving positive reviews, emailing in about how the show's affecting their lives. And, if there's anything that I can do to make this better, I encourage you to email me. You can just email me at scott@lifelonglearner. Anyways, I'm going to wrap up right now. I'm going to land this plane. But thanks so much for listening to this episode with Stephan. He's an amazing guy, and I look forward to seeing you on the next show.